vouchers if they'll stop smoking. $50 to attend an information session, and if they enrol in the program, smoke-free after 4 weeks, another $80 voucher.
But you know why there's this upswing in Eastern Europeans, not necessarily third world, but in the third world countries of Asia and Africa as well as another growth industry for cigarettes, is because they've been gone in there to teenagers, cigarette companies, and given them free cigarettes, got kids addicted to it. They've gone into because these guys have got no morals or ethics at all, and gone, well, our traditional market's shrinking, so we're going to go into third world countries and give them free and get everyone addicted and get it lifelong.
Yeah.
And there's tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people in these countries. So
Pacific's the same.
Next market.
And the Pacific is the same.
The word murderers springs to mind. You're getting someone addicted. If you got a kid addicted to heroin, you'd be vilified, wouldn't you?
Okay, there's the addiction. As a former smoker, is there also the social pacification aspect? It's the mental tune-out as well, isn't it?
And I think that if you look at where smoking is at the moment, socially has become a lot, people have become a lot more distant now than what it was probably 10 years ago even. Smoking, you used to be a social smoker at times when you go to a pub and you go and have a cigarette with people outside and those sorts of things. But, not that I have a lot of experience in pubs at the moment, but I don't see that social smoking as being, at the same level as it once was. On the warehouse vouchers, I think anything that helps, good idea. It'd be interesting to see if it actually helps the long term.
Alcohol should not be a normal part of your life. Let's start with that quote. The New Zealand Medical Association pushing for a ban on alcohol sales in supermarkets because it's dangerous and causing harm to ordinary people. The Prime Minister said yesterday that's a step too far. Alcohol should not be a normal part of your life. Do you agree or not?
I'll drink to that. I'm in danger of being hypocritical here, just having slammed cigarettes back, because I'll have the occasional drink. I'm not a heavy drinker, and I can handle it. But of course, we do know the social and health damages that it causes. I was talking to a police officer friend of mine just on Sunday, and she was saying that it's just all drunk people, all the problems, all drunk people, all the violence. It's drunk people, I know, and then other drugs will go on top of that to make it even worse. So. Yeah, if I was forgetting about my occasional Pinot Noir or even a dirty bourbon, there's a strong argument to make it far less accessible for sure.
I think taking it out of supermarkets is going a step too far. I would like to think that people are responsible enough to make a choice when they go into a supermarket, whether or not they buy the bread and the milk or whether they buy a six-pack of something.
You'd like to think that, But
I think taking it away from people just would be a step too far.
Well, of course, if we're talking prohibition, of course, it hasn't worked. It clearly hasn't worked and wouldn't work. Do I think there are far, far too many bottle stores? Absolutely, I do. Yeah,
well, Dr. Kate Baddock says she believes you can still enjoy a weekend of drinking without having alcohol in the supermarkets, and she's right. I mean, of course, you can. There are. Do you need to take the drastic actions and denormalise the buying of it, though?
But the problem is, it's the bottle stores that are out in the communities that actually have a bigger impact, I would say, than the supermarkets.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And it's really interesting about the normalisation of it, because there are plenty of cultures, European cultures, where alcohol features not heavily in the volume sense, but from an early age and what have you, and they have much more responsible, from what we're told and what I've observed, attitudes towards drinking, and it is a social thing, and people don't get as violent and all the rest of it, or as violent as often, and all those things. So, what is it about our culture that where alcohol fuels this bad behaviour so much more than other countries?
You managed to get that in. Andrew Clay.
I'm damn good.
Scott Campbell on the panel. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, Materia Ture will stay on as Green Party co-leader, but her fellow MPs David Clendon and Kennedy Graham are out the door. They're good to go, they just don't have enough beds or staff. Dunedin Hospital's clinical leader of general surgery tells us why, despite what the health minister said here on Friday night, general surgeons are only operating 2 days a month. Also tonight, a Melbourne father tells me he took matters into his own hand after his teenager son's legs were ravaged by eating blood-loving sea fleas. It's disgusting and excellent too. Sugary drinks tax and the Crusaders victory parade.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batten tēnei. The Green Party has come to an agreement with two renegade MPs where they'll see out the term in Parliament but not be involved in any caucus work. Kennedy Graham and David Clendon took issue with Materia Ture's position on benefit fraud, saying they could not support her as co-leader. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
While they'll remain MPs until the election, Kennedy Graham and David Clendon will be taken off the party's list and retire from parliamentary life after September the 23rd. The party's co-leader, James Shaw, backed off his threat last night to have the MP suspended from the caucus, saying he changed his mind after sleeping on it overnight. Materia Ture will stay on as party leader with the backing of the rest of her caucus and says she has no more skeletons in the closet. Atu i te whare pārimata, ko Chris Bramwell ahau.
Members of the Indian community say Indian students are being exploited by business owners who underpay and overwork them. Immigration New Zealand documents say some Indian business owners are also charging former students thousands of dollars for jobs that will help get them residence. Anu Kolotti from the Migrant Workers Association says the problems are widespread.
The classic things usually are that they're being paid well below the legal minimum wage rate in New Zealand. They're made to work extremely long hours without proper breaks. They're not given any sick leave. They're not given any annual leave. In many cases, a lot of them don't have proper written employment agreements.
Anu Kolotti says former students sometimes pay as much as $30,000 or $40,000 for jobs. The Immigration Minister, Michael Woodhouse, has told Parliament government agencies are trying to stamp out the practice of job selling to foreign students. A Northland man has been charged with supplying Quinn Patterson with firearms before he fatally shot two women at his Whangarei property last month. Patterson killed property manager Wendy Campbell and her daughter Natanya when they visited his home 2 weeks ago. His body was later found in the charred remains of the house. Today, the police arrested a 61-year-old man and have charged him with a number of offences, including supplying Patterson with firearms. The man appeared in the Whangarei District Court this afternoon and will reappear on August the 28th. The head of the embattled Southern District Health Board is reassuring patients and staff that the major problems it faces are being addressed. The DHB says intense pressure on beds is causing delays in prostate cancer checks and cardiac surgery. Its Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, emailed all 4,500 staff today detailing the challenges and how he's dealing with them. He says the top priority for him is the need for new hospital facilities, planning for which is underway but taking time. He says in the meantime the DHB will focus on improving care while continuing to reduce its $22 million deficit.
The issue is about getting the care right and taking it from a balanced approach. I cannot sit there and say the financials are more important than clinical. Clinical and financials have to live in harmony, and we need to deal with that. And so that will mean we will have some tough decisions.
Chris Fleming. The government's revealed more than 30 projects it will support to help clean up about 100 rivers and lakes around the country. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, says $44 million will go towards fencing waterways, planting along streams, developing wetlands and eradicating water weeds. He says major water bodies such as the Selwyn River in Canterbury and Lake Wanaka in Otago will benefit. The lawyer for a woman accused of murdering her friend at a pamper party in Auckland says her client was so drunk she couldn't have intended to kill. Anna Brown is on trial in the High Court in Auckland over the fatal stabbing of Carly Stewart in October last year. Sarah Robson has been in court.
In her closing arguments to the jury, Ms Brown's lawyer, Marie Dyerberg, said her client had been drinking heavily. When she attacked Ms Stewart, she didn't challenge her to a fight or appear violent. She simply whimpered. Ms Dyerberg said after the attack, Ms Brown was confused and she didn't know what she had done. The defence also said Ms Brown made no attempt to flee the scene and she was there when the police arrived. Ms Dyerberg said because tests weren't carried out as soon as possible, it's not known for sure how much alcohol and other drugs were in Ms Brown's system. Justice Wiley will sum up the case to the jury tomorrow morning. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Crusaders fans have braved the cold and rain to welcome home the Super Rugby champions with a victory parade in Christchurch today. One of them, 6-year-old Alex Hale, was never going to let a little bit of rain stop him from turning out. He's been to every one of the side's home games, which have been played in some atrocious conditions this year. Another fan, Kate Watson, told our reporter Conan Young it was important to give the team a proper welcome home.
Very happy about the win.
It's been a long time coming, hasn't it?
It's been a while, a bit of a drought, but they've certainly got all 3 trophies now, haven't they?
Were you a bit nervous towards the end there?
I knew they'd do it.
Crusaders fan Kate Watson. It's 5:05. Sport and the Timaru shot put world champion Tom Walsh is unimpressed with the handling of protests that could have seen him lose his title. As sports editor Stephen Hewson reports, Walsh only learnt he'd received the gold medal at London's track and field world champs moments before walking out to the medal ceremony.
The world indoor champion, the Olympic bronze medalist, is the world outdoor champion.
Tom Walsh has survived 3 protests to finally get his gold medal. When he won yesterday, Americans Joe Kovacs and defending Olympic champion Ryan Krauser both lodged protests over throws they had disallowed. Both were dismissed, but Krauser lodged a second protest, which Walsh was only told had been rejected moments before heading out to the podium. Krauser even arrived at the stadium ready to collect the gold medal. Walsh was unimpressed with the way the process was handled, saying it put a downer on the medal ceremony and made everyone nervous before they headed out to stand on the dais. This is Stephen Hewson.
Badminton officials say an attempt at match fixing at the recent New Zealand Open in Auckland is a wake-up call for all sports. Few details about the incident are being released as New Zealand Badminton continues an investigation into it. The organisation's chief executive, Joe Hitchcock, says a New Zealand player was approached at the tournament and asked to fix a match, but the player reported the matter to officials. Hitchcock says it's the first time they have had to deal with such an incident, but the sport has protocols for dealing with corruption. That's the news.
A moral dilemma.
I would find it to be an incredibly tough call to choose between having to lie to an agency or to put food into my child's mouth.
Under scrutiny.
I think that was a disgraceful stand by Jacinda to take just like that, to undermine Materia at this crucial moment.
A hard decision.
I needed to be clear about the integrity I expected within that cabinet, as Materia herself obviously agreed, having ruled herself out first, that that was the right decision to make.
The Tough Question. Susie Ferguson and Guy and Espin, a morning report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, former Prime Minister and constitutional law expert Sir Geoffrey Palmer on his concerns over the departure of Martin Matthews as Auditor General. And after 10, she was taken from her native Alaskan family as a 6-year-old and placed in a church school. Dr. Rosetta Wall talks about her lifetime of activism on behalf of her people. Join me, Lynn Freeman, here for Catherine Ryan on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
It's service weather through to midnight tomorrow for all of the North Island. Rain spreading east with some heavy falls tomorrow, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon or evening. Strong northerlies about central and northern regions for a time tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, rain setting in with heavy falls, clearing tomorrow morning. However, showers remain about the western ranges and sounds. Bulla Westland and Fiordland, rain becoming widespread this afternoon and heavy from evening, easing to showers overnight. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered light rain, clearing early tomorrow, then mainly fine. However, a few spots of rain persist in Southland and low cloud develops about the coast south of Timaru from afternoon. The Chatham Islands, fine today, rain developing overnight. It is 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina Batten, with your script disappearing on you. I appreciate it. Nice to have you back. Coming up, 2 days a month, that's how much time general surgeons get in theatre at Dunedin Hospital. 2 days a month. Indian students are paying as much as $40,000 for jobs that will help them get residence in New Zealand, and they're being underpaid and exploited along the way. More from John Gerritsen on this big story. And the Crusaders and the Super Rugby Trophy welcomed home in Christchurch. But first, of course, Green Party MPs have thrashed out their differences, we are told, and come to an agreement which they hope will see them through to the election. As we heard here last night, 2 Green MPs have taken issue with Materia Ture's position on benefit fraud, saying they could could not support her as co-leader. While they'll remain MPs until the election, Kennedy Graham and David Clinton will be taken off the party's list and retire from parliamentary life after September 23rd. Metiria Ture will stay on as party co-leader with James Shaw with the backing of the rest of her caucus. And she says she has no more skeletons in her closet. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
It's been an unexpectedly tumultuous week for the Green Party. It has, for its parliamentary life, been an extremely stable grouping in Parliament. Of course, they have had disagreements, but the caucus has always kept those behind closed doors. So to have two MPs in open rebellion was unprecedented. James Shaw spoke to the media after this morning's meeting.
At the start of our caucus meeting, Dave Clinton and Kennedy Graham offered to withdraw from the caucus for the remainder of the Parliament, which of course is only a few weeks at this point, and the caucus has accepted their withdrawal. That's kind of effective immediately.
Mr Shaw backed off his threat last night to have the MP suspended from the caucus for bringing the party into disrepute, saying he changed his mind after sleeping on it last night. He says the pair offered to withdraw from the caucus, but there was no discussion around the leadership.
Because there's no discussion to have. So we had a discussion about Dave and Kennedy's withdrawal and you know what the events of yesterday. We had a kind of a round of discussion around that and then moved on.
David Clinton, who until today was ranked 16th on the party's list, says this morning's meeting was very open.
The outcome of that meeting is that Kennedy and I voluntarily withdrew from the caucus, so we'll not be involved in political, rather electoral discussion, strategic matters. We'll simply do our regular parliamentary work. We'll do our work in the House, select committees, those sorts of things, but we will step aside from the electoral or campaign-focused work.
Kennedy Graham, ranked 8th, says it's a tough moment for everyone in the party.
Us and our colleagues and the party as a whole, but when you say sad, you make your stance, you make your best judgments as you can, you make peace with your own conscience, and I can sleep at night.
Dr Graham first broke his decision to RNZ News last night, saying he began to lose confidence in Mrs Ture's leadership 3 weeks ago.
I initiated a conversation with the leadership, including Dave Clinton as muster of the party, the night of the AGM speech, and that has been an intensive and continuing dialogue with the leadership and, for that matter, within caucus. So it's been a part of 3 weeks or more. I got to a stage where, we could all agree that in the exercise of our personal conscience, we were free as individual candidates to say that we did not necessarily condone beneficiary fraud.
Metiria Ture says she's saddened by the actions of the two MPs.
They believed it was necessary for them. I believe it is necessary for my party and for the people I represent for me to stay on as the co-leader of the Green Party. I have the backing of my caucus. I have the backing of my party.
Mrs Ture says she believes people who want to bring down the Greens are making her a personal target. She says there are no more secrets in her past.
There have been some quite wild accusations over the last few weeks. No, there will no doubt be more of those wild accusations. But I'm really clear. I know what I did wrong. I've talked to New Zealanders about that and explained why. I've never asked them to agree with what I did.
Julianne Genter says the accusations that Metiria Ture has had to suffer, saying that she should step down, are completely disproportionate to what she actually did.
The media's focus on what happened 25 years ago in a kind of punitive way is a distraction, but Metiria told her story voluntarily in order to be able to raise this question of our welfare system and how it's broken and hurts people who are living in poverty. And that's what we should be talking about.
Metiria Ture says she now goes into the election with the full backing of her caucus and her party. Atu i te whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramwell aho.
After 6, Jane Patterson, our political editor, will be giving us her take on the opposition response to all of this. But here's a Trivial Pursuit question for you first. What electorate, in percentage terms, are the strongest supporters of the Greens? Well, we're at the last election anyway. The answer is Wellington Central, which is per capita our best educated electorate in tertiary education terms and also one of our wealthiest. Now, Metiria Ture's stand was about poverty and life on Well, a benefit. So, Mihi Narangi Forbes, our Māori Issues correspondent, and Bradley White, our cameraman, went out to Manurewa and one of the country's poorer suburbs to find out what people think about Matiria Ture there and whether they'd do the same thing that she has confessed to doing.
Manurewa, South Auckland, is home to just over 80,000 people.
We're finding it hard now, seeing that we are on lower income. Now it's hard to make ends meet.
5% of people in Manurewa get an unemployment benefit and 5.5% receive the DPB, the highest proportion of any electorate in the country.
I lived at a place at the Manurewa Marae as I became homeless.
How was that for you going out there?
That was hard. That was hard for me because to put my pride down. You know, me and my partner, we went through a lot.
Manurewa loosely translates as the drifting kite, but there's not a lot of kite flying here in Manurewa. Most people are just trying to make ends meet. As of 2013, the median income was $24,700 a year, compared to the national median of $28,500. We met Mel on her way out of a WINZ office in the centre of the suburb. She's recently had surgery and gets some financial assistance from the government, but her 5 children are grown up.
In today's, with the expenses now, my kids and me wouldn't have been able to do it. It was hard enough then. I used to have to go out and prostitute on the street, sell tinnies, whatever I could, just to make extra money for milk and bread, not luxuries, milk and bread money. That's all we needed was food money. That was always trying to feed them. We never had enough to feed my kids, and they always ate noodles and like shit food, and the kids will tell you.
Tom is on the sole parent benefit, raising his 3-month-old daughter.
Everybody's struggling around, this is Manurewa. There's not much opportunity around here.
Have you worked before?
Yes, I have. I worked for like 10 years.
Can I ask about Mum?
Synthetics overtook her judgment or whatever, and then so the tamariki ora gave the child to me.
Rahul came to New Zealand as a student from India. Now he's seeking asylum as a refugee, and today he's applying for an emergency benefit. And so have you got anywhere to stay?
Yeah, I'm living in Manurewa and I'm flatting with other Indians, and yeah, that's a good place. Yeah.
How many to your house?
We have 3-room house and we're living like 3 people each room.
For Katerina, who came to New Zealand from Kiribati 8 years ago, she's grateful for the WINZ assistance she receives. She has a blood cancer and a thyroid issue.
I'm homeless and I was cared by people in the country. I'm so proud of them by caring people from like me, and thanks very much for caring and protect my human dignity. Yeah, that I'm a human being and they protect my dignity. So I'm proud of New Zealand, and I encourage all my kids to work hard for New Zealand.
Mark has lived here for 40 years and watched the place change.
Well, not to be a redneck or anything, but there's a lot of different cultures here now. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And we've got like a lot of different restaurants and that here now.
His children are grown up now, but he sees poverty around him and he worries for the solo mums and the good families struggling to get by.
I've got to admit, like in the last 9 years, that since National's taken over, there's more homelessness, and you're tripping over beggars on the street from here, from Papakura to say Penrose, there's beggars everywhere, and that never used to be like that before in the past. So National's gone wrong somewhere.
Do you vote?
Yeah, I always vote.
What do you think about Matiria Ture? She got into a bit of strife.
I think when you're in desperate, like in strife and that, you'll do anything to help to feed your children, so I've got nothing against what she did.
He's not alone.
She's an inspiration to women, she's an inspiration to Māori, and she should be patted on the back for having an education and not being on the corner asking for a cigarette.
You have to find a way of living, and she did for her and her child. I'm trying to find it now with my child, me and my child now, and it's pretty hard. If I had an odd job on the side and I didn't tell these fellas, all good, more money for me and my child. But what she did was it's normal for us struggling.
So if you did have an odd job, you'd do it and you wouldn't tell them?
Yeah, I would. I'll tell you, I would.
What do you want for Manurewa?
I want, first and foremost, this homeless thing to be stopped, to give back Manurewa how it used to be, how you could walk the streets and you don't see this. I don't blame them for they're going through, but I want to see a lot of changes here. Everywhere else is changing. Everywhere else is looking good, but not Manurewa.
But despite the woes and the hard times, those from rewa, as they say out here, are still hopeful.
Yeah. And that is it from me.
Kia ora. Mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei ko Mihingarangi Forbes ahau.
Very quickly before we move on, let's look at some of those South Auckland electorates. Manukau, East, Mangere and Manurewa all gave the Greens less than 4% of their party vote. In contrast, Epsom, which has the highest household income of any electorate in New Zealand, gave the Greens 12.5% of their party vote. It's 5:20. We turn now to the general surgeons at Dunedin Hospital and how much surgery they're actually doing. In our investigations of the past fortnight, we've repeatedly been told that urology, cardiothoracic and general surgery have had their theatre hours restricted by a shortage of ICU beds for post-operative care. This can even mean patients being prepped for surgery, ready to go into theatre and then getting bumped. In some cases, as we've heard, more than once. But last week we were told the pressure on theatre time and post-operative care is so great that general surgeons get 1 day a fortnight in theatre. 1 day a fortnight. We raised this with the Minister when we spoke to him on Friday night.
I struggle to believe that a full-time general surgeon is only doing 2 lists per month. They'd be doing 2 lists per week. Are you sure you're reading that?
2 lists per month. Operating twice a month.
Well, we need to look into that because that just doesn't sound plausible.
Jonathan Coleman, who, as you heard, said he'd look into that figure, and we did too. It's correct. As confirmed by Dr. Joe Kreiser, the clinical leader of general surgery at Dunedin Hospital.
Our surgeons have 2 operating lists a month, so it's a 1 operating list every 2 weeks.
1 operating list is 1 day, is it?
Yes.
So we raised this with the Minister on Friday night on Checkpoint and said general surgeons are getting 2 days a month, and he said that is just not conceivable, but it is fact, is it?
It is indeed a fact.
2 days a month?
Yes, which is frustrating, and it's a frustration we have been trying to move forward on for a number of years, but we're still in a situation where there isn't adequate theatre resource provided to our surgeons to be able to do the work they're expected to do.
And that the ministry requires them to do too, right?
Indeed. So we are provided with targets which we need to meet as a service, but we have not been able to do that.
Through no fault of your own, in other words, is some of this simply down to lack of ICU beds, lack of theatre time, competition with other departments for theatre time? Are you being excluded from theatre when you are available to operate and want to operate?
Very much so. We as surgeons should have at least a list a week to be able to manage the volume that's coming through and meet the targets, but unfortunately, through lack of resource provided from the ICU and theatre capacity side of things, we have not been able to do that.
And if you can't get in to the theatre for reasons that seem on the face of it to be beyond your control, and if people are forced to wait longer, are there financial penalties applied by the ministry in some cases because of that?
There are, and that's where we struggle, because we're being financially penalised for things which are out of our control, and we've been unable to resolve.
So you're talking about a resources issue as a result of a lack of resources, a shortage of resources. You're not able to operate as much as you would like, as much as the ministry requires you to operate, and the net result of that is the ministry financially penalises you.
That's right.
Would you like to operate more often?
Very much so. There are patients who need have those operations to improve their quality of life, and at the moment we're struggling to provide good patient care because of lack of access to elective theatre.
Are you available to operate more often? In other words, if you could get more time in theatre, would you be able to do the operations?
Yes. I mean, there are people waiting for months and years for certain procedures, which unfortunately we cannot provide.
Are you frustrated by this?
Very much so. It has been a frustration which we've shared, and we've tried to move forward, but currently I struggle to see a way forward without extra resource provided to ICU and theatre access. Right.
Can we compare Southern with other DHBs? If you were in Canterbury or Auckland, for example, would you be getting a day a week?
Yes.
Right, you would?
Yes.
So
there is no other DHB, I don't think, in the country where a general surgeon would not have access at least once a week to elective operating.
That's Dr. Jo Kreis, the clinical leader of general surgery at Dunedin Hospital. Now, in the past fortnight, we've spoken to the DHB CEO, its chief medical officer and its government-appointed commissioner, all who've made themselves available. As you've heard, of course, on Friday night, we've also spoken to the minister, but we haven't spoken to the ministry, and we'd really like to. We're interested in two things: financial penalties being applied on DHBs when delays to surgery are beyond their control. Now, in a written statement to us, the ministry says it has not imposed financial penalties on the Southern DHB. Surgeons have said that they certainly are a possibility, but they haven't been imposed, the ministry tells us. We've just spoken to the DHB CEO. Our producer Bridget Burke's just got off the phone with him, Chris Fleming, who says whilst they haven't had penalties imposed, as a result of under-delivering on targets, they've been able to invoice the ministry for $1 million less. So there is a financial cost. We want to discuss that with the ministry. The second issue we'd like to look at is hospitals referring patients back to their GPs so they're not on waiting lists. We revealed this last night on Checkpoint, a kind of referral merry-go-round which avoids financial penalties for excessive waiting times. This is a widespread practice, we now believe. Outside of Dunedin too, the ministry wouldn't join us to discuss that either. We also asked the Southern DHB if we could visit Dunedin Hospital and see their ICU facilities and where the new beds are going. That request too was declined. Meanwhile, last night on Checkpoint, we revealed two orthopaedic surgeons have written to the minister to respond to some of the points he made on our program on Friday night. Well, that was followed up by Labour's health spokesperson David Clark during question time in Parliament this afternoon.
My question is to the Minister of Health. Does he agree with the authors of an open letter to him reported on Checkpoint yesterday that comments he made on Southern District Health Board suggesting one of our departments is, quote, toxic, and that the District Health Board is, quote, is a cot case, are particularly unhelpful? If so, will he now apologise for those comments?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Dr Jonathan Coleman.
Mr Speaker, the comments the member is referring to have been plucked from a 14-minute interview I did last Friday. As regards the first comment, that's how matters have been described to me. I also said in the interview that the reason we had to put a commissioner into Southern District Health Board was because it was a cot case. Turning around Southern DHB was never going to be fast or easy, but I'm pleased to say that thanks to the hard work of the commissioner, the new CE and the 4,500 staff, the DHB is on a long-term track to sustainability. The government is working on the indicative business case for Dunedin Hospital. The facility needs upgrading, and this government is determined to make that happen.
Put a Crown monitor in 2010. Supplementary.
A supplementary question, Dr David Clark.
Does he think it is acceptable that 1/3 of orthopaedic patients at Southern DHB are unable to be seen and are referred back to their GP because of a lack of capacity?
The Honourable Dr Jonathan.
Well, as with any assertion that member makes, we'd have to go and check that. He was wrong on the ICU beds, but the fact is, across the country, out of all those patients referred from general practitioners for first specialist assessments, 87% see a specialist, about 5% actually are turned away, another 8% just have been inappropriately referred or their time has passed. Thanks.
Health Minister and Health Spokesperson Jonathan Coleman responding to questions in Parliament from Labour's David Clark. Meanwhile, an elderly man spent 26 hours waiting in Dunedin's hospital emergency department to be admitted before a bed became available in a ward last week. The man in his 80s had recently had spinal surgery, which had become infected due to a lack of post-operative care. When other issues developed, he arrived at the hospital in an ambulance, only to wait 26 hours and 4 shift changes before he was admitted to a ward. The man's daughter, Anne, told me her father had earlier had his spinal surgery postponed due to the lack of an ICU bed, but finally had the operation and spent 10 days in hospital.
When he was discharged, bear in mind he's a man in his 80s, when he was discharged, district nurse was supposed to come the next day and deal with his wound, and he was supposed to have physio organised. 3 weeks later, no one had been near him. We ended up sending him down, so no post-operative care. And when we spoke to the hospital, I spoke to the hospital, they said, sorry, he fell through the cracks. And it's like, I don't know how that happens. But anyway, so he fell through the cracks. The wound was infected, so it was infected, and then we had antibiotics and bits and pieces. And then earlier last week, he had to go back in again because he'd lost feeling in his legs and his wound was infected. And so my brother took him in, and he got him in there sort of early evening, and in the early hours of the following morning, around 1:30, my brother texted me and said they're going to admit him up to the ward. And then it was around 7 p.m. that night when he finally got out of A&E. He was in A&E for over 24 hours with my brother. Saw 4 successive shifts of people. So that's, and then we finally got a bed for him, and that's been sorted out. And again, because he's under neurology, then they're going to do another procedure, and he's due to go up for surgery, fingers crossed, next week again. Most people that I know with elderly parents in there hover. We call it hovering. And you hover around and ask questions and demand things. And I feel bad for the staff. I feel really bad for the staff. The whole time that my brother was in A&E with Dad, every time he complained and said, look, what's going on? He's had nothing to eat. He's an old man. Like Craig was bringing him food and things like that because they're not geared up for it. And the nurses they thought it was unacceptable. There was nothing they could do about it, absolutely nothing. And all they could do was give him complaint forms.
What is your sense of the kind of pressure the staff are under in there?
Oh, incredible. Like I feel really, really bad for them. They have absolutely no control over this, and they're the front line, and the people are frustrated and upset and angry, and they're copping it left, right and centre, and there's absolutely nothing that those staff can do. I was staggered when I read, I think, one of your article that there was only 9 ICU beds. That's staggering. I mean, all it takes is a car accident and that's it. There's just nothing. I'm shocked, actually, but it's just got progressively worse. And I don't think it's not the staff's fault. They just don't. When they have these surgeries, they have to have an ICU bed for certain types of surgeries, and most surgeries. For
post-operative care. So in the first instance, when your dad's surgery was delayed, you were told it was because of a lack of ICU beds? Correct. Explicitly told that.
Neurological registrar told us, because he came down, he was sent down by Mr. Taha, who's Dad's surgeon, and he came down and he said, I'm really sorry, we are ready to go. We have no ICU bed for you. It was taken up by somebody that had an accident, which is, we understand. I mean, it's just the way it goes. Somebody's critically ill and they've had an accident, that's fine. But the fact that we were specifically told that.
And so the surgery team and the theatre were ready to operate on your dad?
Correct.
And so because of a lack of an ICU bed, presumably they have to stand down?
Correct.
It's Anne Rogers, who is the daughter of the patient we were talking about. The Southern DHB's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Nigel Miller, says he's very disappointed that any patient would need to spend such a long time in ED. In a statement, he says it's our intention to provide a service that responds to patients, needs in appropriate time. We are more than happy to hear from the patient or family and to meet with them. That from the Chief Medical Officer of Health. 26 minutes to 6 on Checkpoint. Coming up, why Indian students are paying as much as $40,000 for jobs that will help them get residence in New Zealand. And a father takes matters into his own hands after his teenager's legs were left ravaged and bloodied by flesh-eating sea fleas. We'd love your feedback tonight, particularly on the Southern DHB and Materia Ture's decision to stay on as party leader whilst her two fellow MPs depart. You can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, and our email address is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Nona is next with business news, and she's got a heap of papers on the table. But first, Katrina with the 5:35 headlines.
The Green Party has come to an agreement with two renegade MPs where they'll see out the term in Parliament but not be involved in any caucus work. Kennedy Graham and David Clendon took issue with Materia Ture's position on benefit fraud, saying they could not support her as co-leader. Mrs Ture will stay on as party co-leader with the backing of the rest of her caucus and says she has no more skeletons in the closet. Members of the Indian community say Indian students are being exploited by business owners who underpay and overwork them. Immigration New Zealand documents say some Indian business owners are also charging former students thousands of dollars for jobs that will help them get residence. The Immigration Minister, Michael Woodhouse, has told Parliament government agencies are trying to stamp out the practice of job selling to foreign students. A Northland man has been charged with supplying Quinn Patterson with firearms before he fatally shot two women at his Whangarei property last month. Patterson killed property manager Wendy Campbell and her daughter Natania when they visited his home 2 weeks ago. The head of the embattled Southern District Health Board is reassuring patients and staff that the major problems it faces are being addressed. The Chief Executive, Chris Fleming, emailed all 4,500 staff today, detailing the challenges and how he's dealing with them. The government's revealed more than 30 projects it will support to clean up about 100 rivers and lakes around the country. They include the Selwyn River in Canterbury and Lake Wanaka in Otago. The Australian government has decided on a non-binding postal ballot on the issue of same-sex marriage if the Senate refuses to approve a compulsory plebiscite. The government will introduce the bill for a compulsory plebiscite this week, but the Senate is again expected to block it. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock very shortly.
Oh, shut up. Katrina Batten having a dig. Blair, can you just kill all microphones in here for 1 second? I'm just going to cough violently. Thank you, Blair. Nona.
Are you feeling better now? Are you much better?
Sorry, Nona.
No worries.
The government has introduced new legislation to regulate telecommunications. What do the changes mean?
Well, we got a lot of statements today, as you can see, quite a few papers
I'm very impressed.
And in any case, it looks like the government has decided that this Amendment Act will bring the telecommunications regulations into the 21st century. Where have they been, John? I can only ask. I mean, it is actually 2017. It's a long time into the 21st century. Am I wrong? Or
no, you're not wrong. So what are they going to do? What is the government trying to do?
For one thing, they're going to deregulate the copper network. So for communities that have fibre, they will deregulate the networks in those areas. But for areas of the country where there is no fibre or modern network services, those services will still be regulated so that they will still be available to those consumers.
Right.
Now, that's only about 15% of the country. So a good number of people are going to lose their copper network, presumably, because they'll be deregulated.
What incentives, penalties, encouragements, carrot sticks, etc.?
As long as as long as the services are maintained so that people prefer fibre and they get fibre, they'll be happy enough with that, and they won't need the copper network. So that's going to be a benefit to Chorus for sure. Now, the other thing it's going to do is it's going to allow the Commerce Commission to bring in codes of conduct over telecommunications. So this will be to help consumers make sure that things are fair, because digital services are evolving rapidly, and so the rules it's hard to set. So this is giving the Commerce Commission more power to come up with codes of conduct as needs be. So there you go, and who knows what those things might be.
I remember when I first started Radio New Zealand being allowed to use the mobile phone. Back in about 1989 or 1999, it was very exciting.
It was very heavy too.
It was very heavy. It was the size of a briefcase almost.
It really was.
And if you could take it out, there was a special occasion.
It really was. That's right. You had to sign it out. John, you had to bring it back in one piece, so to speak. Yeah. So that's pretty much the big changes there. And now they're going to introduce this bill this month. And from the feedback I've seen, it's been generally thought of as a positive. Certainly, Chorus's share price rose 2 cents today, $4.50. So I guess the market liked it too. Overall, our market rose 11 points to a new record, 7,783. And that's pretty much in line with what we're seeing around the world. The markets everywhere are very, very high. Asia, Europe, and the US. And our dollar's a little bit weaker, and that's because there's expectations that inflation pressures are really weak here in New Zealand, which means that there's no incentive for the RNZ, that's the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, to raise interest rates. We're going to hear from them on Thursday. Meanwhile, our dollar is at 73.5, so that's about a half a cent from where we were yesterday. 92.9 Australian and 56.3 British pounds.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. Public health advocates and researchers have backed up their call for a sugary drinks tax with a petition signed by nearly 10,000 people. That petition was handed to Green and Māori Party MPs in Wellington this morning, along with a policy brief showing options for how such a tax would work. This report from Michael Kropp.
On average, New Zealanders consume 6 times the recommended amount of sugar each day, and those 37 teaspoons are having an impact on our waistlines. We're the 3rd fattest in the world, and our health, causing type 2 diabetes, gout, fatty livers and tooth decay. Dr. Rob Beaglehole, a dentist, showed 11 teeth pulled from a 3-year-old who had been drinking Coca-Cola out of a baby bottle.
Every single day in New Zealand there are multiple kids, young kids, who need to have a general anaesthetic to have their teeth taken out. Last year, 6,600 kids had a general anaesthetic to take out one or multiple teeth. We also know that last year 30,000 children had one or more teeth taken out.
The policy brief, also delivered to MPs, outlines the problem and provides 3 possible tax options ranging from about 30 cents to $1 per litre. It says a tax in the middle of that range could raise about $100 million a year to spend on health and nutrition education, while cutting consumption among those worst affected, those on low incomes, Māori and Pacifica. Marama Fox, co-leader of the Māori Party, says such a tax would help drive the price of sugary drinks up.
Teeth should not be an indicator of wealth for our population, and if you look at those who are affected most by teeth decay, it is Māori, it is Pacifica, and the Asian community actually. Māori, I think, consume twice as much on average for every child of sugary drinks than non-Māori.
The Green Party's view is similar. Their health spokesperson Julianne Genter says the chronic diseases associated with excessive consumption of sugary drinks and other junk foods are a problem for everyone, and therefore tax is a solution. The Opportunities Party's deputy leader Jeff Simmons says society is setting up kids in poor communities to fail.
If you are growing up in conditions of poverty, you are more likely to eat these cheaper processed foods, one because of expense, but also just because your parents are working 2 jobs and need to put something on the table, and because you're more likely to be stressed, so actually you are more attracted to sort of the sugar hit that sugary drinks and junk food generally provides.
Despite such a tax having the backing of the World Health Organisation and local health groups such as the New Zealand Medical, Dental and Public Health Associations, 74 health professors, the Heart Foundation, Toi Tangata, Hapai Te Hauora, the government is yet to be convinced. Health Minister Dr. Jonathan Coleman says he's keeping an eye on the emerging evidence and practice. But he says there's no evidence a sugar tax decreases obesity rates. Instead, he points to the Childhood Obesity Plan and its wider range of interventions, and the food and beverage industry's recent commitment to develop solutions to reduce childhood obesity. For Checkpoint, Michael Cropper home.
Indian students are paying as much as $40,000 for jobs that will help them get residence in New Zealand, and they're being underpaid and exploited along the way. Immigration New Zealand documents describe the practice as an established business model among some Indian business owners. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen filed this report.
This former foreign student, who asked not to be identified, paid an agent to get him a job last year and then found his hourly rate was a lot less than officially stated.
He offers me like that I will find the job for you and you have to pay for that one.
How much did he want you to pay?
He just told me 35,000 for that one.
Did you pay?
Yeah, I have paid all that one.
What was the job? I mean, how much did the job pay you?
The job was a restaurant manager. He just pay like the minimum base for me, but in the offer letter he has wrote $19.
The man says he got $16,000 back because the restaurant shut down, but he now has just 3 months to find another job or lose his chance of getting residence. Another former student, Shera, says from 2012 to 2015, his Indian employer made him repay a third of his pay.
$624 that was my paid. $400 belongs to me, and the rest of the money I was giving back to him. Not like every week, but he said, I will ring you when I need this money. So he just rang me one time and then said, look, $10,000 transfer into this account. One time he took $7,000 as a cash. I was exploited, totally.
Shera says if he'd complained, his employer would have cancelled his work permit and his chance of gaining residence. Last year, he sacked him anyway. Anu Kalotti from the Migrant Workers Association says job selling is a common problem for Indian students, caused by the situation they find themselves in rather than their ethnicity.
When somebody's on a temporary visa here and they would like to be here longer term or on a permanent basis, they're desperate, they're much more vulnerable. So it is much easier for the employers to exploit those vulnerable migrant workers.
But Steve McGill from Immigration New Zealand says foreign students are sometimes willing participants in the practice.
I wouldn't say abuse of students personally. I would say that Indian students will have a motivation to come here. Some of them will not be able to meet the standards here, so they will try it on. In doing so, they may work with employers to present to us that they've got a legitimately high-paying job that meets the threshold for permanent residence under the skilled migration category.
Steve McGill says immigration does not know if job selling is widespread. Immigration lawyer Alistair McClymont says New Zealand's education system is marketed in India as a stepping stone to residence, so that's what students are aiming for. He says immigration rules push foreign students into jobs where they're likely to be exploited.
The initial instinct of the students when they come here is to come and work for a large, respectable employer, but they soon discover that that's not going to get them residency, and that the only pathway to residency is by working in the small businesses, which makes them very vulnerable to exploitation.
Alistair McClymont says it's not just Indian students who are paying for jobs, the same problem exists in the Chinese community. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
The trial of a woman accused of murdering her friend at an alcohol-fuelled pamper party is in its final stages. 37-year-old Anna Brown stabbed mother of two Carly Stewart in the head at the party at a house in West Auckland in October of last year, but she's pleaded not guilty to murder. Our reporter Sarah Robson has been at her trial at the High Court in Auckland. I asked her what the background was to the case.
So Anna Brown and Carly Stewart were among a group of friends who had gathered at a house in Te Atatu in October last year. They were there for a pamper party. Defence lawyer Marie Dyberg said it was a chance for a group of friends to catch up, have a few drinks, have their nails done, basically have a good fun afternoon. But things took an ugly turn. It's alleged that Ms Brown stabbed Ms Stewart, her friend, in the head with a large kitchen knife. The stab wound was 11 centimetres deep and Ms Stewart died after losing large amounts of blood.
Right, lawyers have been summing up their cases today, right? Both the Crown, the prosecution and the defence. What did the Crown have to say?
So the Crown prosecutor, Nick Webby, told the jury that Ms Brown had been drinking heavily at this party. Her intoxication mixed with her ADHD and her antisocial disorders had led to her being, an extreme emotional response that was basically out of proportion to anything that had happened that day. Mr Webby said that as the day went on, Ms Brown got more and more aggressive and angry. The jury has heard that there was a scuffle between Ms Brown and Ms Stewart before that fatal attack. Now, the Crown argues that Anna Brown's attack on Ms Stewart, it wasn't random. It wasn't a random drunken flail. Rather, it was a carefully directed blow to Ms Stewart's head. Now, Mr Webby also went into details around, Ms Brown had deliberately picked up the biggest knife in the kitchen. It was about 30 centimetres long before she went and attacked Ms Stewart. He said that Ms Brown wasn't too drunk to form an intent to kill Ms Stewart, and she had actually tried to conceal that weapon as she walked in and before the stabbing, and also as she left. Mr Webby also dealt with Ms Brown leaving the house after the attack. The Crown argues that she was fleeing and she came back to later deny that she had done anything wrong. She told police she hadn't done anything, but she began to change her story. She talked about different drugs she had been on. When she got caught out in each lie, she changed her story. So the Crown argues that basically Ms Brown has been untruthful and she'd gone into damage control mode over what she had done.
Right, so very strong closing from the Crown. The defence, which in this case is Marie Dyberg, right?
That's correct.
Gets to respond. What does she say?
So the defence is arguing, Ms Brown accepts that she did stab her friend and that blow did cause her death.
Right, so that's not in dispute.
That's not in dispute.
Right.
However, the defence is arguing that there was no murderous intent. Marie Dyberg says that Ms Brown was very intoxicated. She was so drunk that she couldn't have any murderous intent. Now, Ms Dyberg also was quite critical. She said that there were delays in testing, so urine samples. So we actually don't know how much alcohol was in Ms Brown's system, nor do we know exactly what drugs. However, there was some presence of methamphetamine. Now, Ms Dyberg also argued that Ms Brown didn't actually flee the scene. The group of women who were at the party had actually told Ms Brown in quite a threatening way to leave because of what she had done. She made no attempt to run or hide from the police. She actually didn't know. She was telling police, I don't know what I've done. I haven't done anything wrong. And Ms Dyberg also made the point that if you think you've committed murder, you don't hang around waiting for the police. You don't go back to the scene, and you also wouldn't stab someone in front of a host of witnesses. Ms Dyberg also said that throughout the day there was no ill feeling between the two. These two were friends. They were laughing and joking throughout the day. No one was scared of Ms Brown throughout the day. She wasn't exhibiting any forms of anger or violence towards anyone. And when the stabbing did actually occur, Ms Dyberg said Ms Brown, she didn't come in violent, she didn't come in angry, she wasn't, challenging for a fight. She just whimpered Ms Stewart's name, and that was it. She also quickly dealt with the issue around Ms Brown's ADHD and her antisocial personality disorders. Now, the defence argues that they have doesn't make her any more likely to kill someone.
Sarah Robson, our reporter who's been in court. The judge sums up tomorrow and then the jury retires to consider their verdict. The Crusaders are home in Christchurch and their fans have turned out to welcome them. The team returned late last night after beating the Lions 25-17 in the Super Rugby final in Johannesburg at the weekend. That is not an easy ground to win at. But their parade was in Christchurch this afternoon and our reporter Conan Young was there.
Hi John, look, I'm here at the Crusaders Welcome Home Victory Parade. About 2,000 people have turned out to see their team, see their heroes, who've made it all the way back from South Africa, where they became the first overseas team to win a final in a Super Rugby final. It means so much to the people here. I've had a chat to a lot of the fans, a 6-year-old who went along to every single game the Crusaders played at home in some atrocious conditions. Not the best weather here today, but it hasn't put off anybody. People are really keen to see these guys. Everybody waving their flags, got their Crusaders rugby jerseys on. The team walked along Worcester Boulevard, holding the Super Rugby Championship Cup, and fans all had a chance to get autographs with the team. had their photos taken with them. Had a chat to Scott Robertson, the coach. He said he was feeling pretty good, but I don't know, his face told another story. There's obviously been some pretty long and well-deserved celebrations by that team for winning this championship. He said, though, he was feeling pretty good and just great to be bringing this cup home to Christchurch, to Canterbury. Yeah, like I say, a long time waiting for this to actually happen. 9 years since the Crusaders last won the Super Rugby Championship. They came close in 2011 after the earthquakes, a year which sort of was really tough for people here, and a year in which they almost did it. 2014 again, lost just in the last seconds of that game and against the Waratahs. So finally, after 9 years, they've done it. They've done what the Hurricanes couldn't do. Beat the Lions in South Africa, and you can just see on the looks of people's faces here today, just real joy.
Go the Crusaders, although there was a cheap shot at the Canes at the end, I thought. Kind of what ate Sam's legs? Sam Carnese went for a swim at Melbourne's Brighton Beach on Saturday after a soccer game, but when he got out of the chilly water, his legs and feet were seeping with blood. His dad, Jared, told me he went to the beach to track down the culprit. A warning, if you're watching, some of the pictures are frankly revolting.
Well, look, we're a pretty jovial family, and he's rocked up on the doorstep. He's called me from outside. He said, "Dad, you better come outside." I said, "Why?" He said, "I'll just come outside with you." And so my daughter and I went down, and he was standing there with half his legs, in blood. I go, "What did you do?" I've just looked at him, puzzled. He said, "I don't know. Obviously I've been across the beach icing my legs. And when I got out, this is what I found." So he wasn't in pain at that stage because the icy water had essentially anaesthetised his legs. But he was puzzled. He wasn't, he was calm. We were calm, but we were more taking the piss, going, "Well, I don't know what you've done, but you're a bloody idiot."
but in fact, he was completely innocent as charged. I mean, he'd had a game of football, right, and he was just cooling his feet and legs down.
Yeah, that's right. And but it's at night time, and standing still. Although hundreds of footballers do this every year,
absolutely,
of course, on the bay, and runners and stuff, and I do as well. I have done over 20 years. And, no one's ever seen anything like this, and so it's a bit of a red herring day for Sam and the community.
Yeah, so Dad decides to play marine biologist. This is you, right? And you think, I'm going to find out what the hell happened here. So you head back down to the beach yourself.
Yeah, well, I was certain that the nurses or the doctors weren't prepared to jump in the water and do that, and we just needed to get to the bottom of what ate Sam's legs. So it just made sense to do that, see if we can gather some specimens or some evidence. And my other three kids were quite buoyed by that. They're going, "Yeah, let's go out there and try to find these suckers," and, which we did, and that just meant that the doctors were able to make more informed decisions over the last 24 hours.
And can you tell me about the rate at which they ate the meat? How hungry were they?
Well, it was pretty fascinating. We had a pool net with bloodied meat bones attached inside the pool net. When we pulled them out, we took them back home in the esky, and we sort of played scientists for an hour before the kids' bedtime. We put them on different plates or bowls with their water, and just put a few bits of meat out, bloodied meat, and look. It was really interesting. They were scampering around initially, and some of them went straight for the meat, and the others were sort of scampering around. By the time it was morning, I made sure I put it outside so that it was cool, they sort of keep in the right environment. In the morning, there was no activity, but on closer look, they were all just connected to the meat, and they'd sucked the life out of the meat. There was hardly any red left in the meat. These little mite-sized things, which are now we'd call sea fleas, had turned from a sandy colour to a red colour because they were full of blood, and the meat had essentially lost its colour. Now, that didn't stop them from chowing down on this. They kept going on the meat throughout the day, and it all disappeared. Right, so and now they're all dead because they've eaten so much, or they've maybe run out of oxygen in the water. But they've eaten it all, so they're pretty good at what they do.
That is an extraordinary story. This is hypocritical of me because I'm a meat eater myself, but it is kind of disgusting. Meanwhile, how is young Sam? Is he recovering? Because clearly he loves his football and he needs his feet and legs. What sort of nick is he in?
Look, he loves his footy and he's a triathlete and he's a bit of a jack of all trades when it comes to sport. So he's really keen to, get back into it. The legs are still sore. If he gets discharged today, he'll be in a wheelchair for a couple of days.
Wow.
So that his wounds don't open up, and also that pressure on his legs just gives a little bit of pain at the moment. So he's going to have a full recovery. We hope that Sam doesn't have any scarring from this, and time will tell. But he's a really positive kid. He's taken this in his stride, and hats off to him. He's really dealt with it in the right way. So all pretty positive, and people have enjoyed the story, and they've been educated along the way. It's been great.
Been great. Sam's dad, Jared. It's 6 o'clock on Checkpoint.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. The Greens co-leader Matiria Ture is not resiling from comments she made about supporting beneficiaries who lie to work an income because they're struggling financially. Green MPs David Clendon and Kennedy Graham lost confidence in her leadership because they believe she was condoning people lying to public agencies. After a caucus meeting at Parliament, it was decided they'll stay on as Green MPs but won't seek re-election next month. They won't participate in any caucus activities or in campaigning. Mrs Ture is standing by her original comments.
What I've said is I will not condemn people who have had to do the same thing I did. And that's because I can't possibly condemn them and accept my own history. I want to change the system so that nobody ever has to lie to win.
Matiria Ture says she now goes into the election with the full backing of the caucus and her party. The Immigration Minister Michael Woodhouse has told Parliament government agencies are trying to stamp out the practice of job selling to foreign students. Immigration New Zealand documents say some Indian business owners are selling student jobs that will help them get residency. Responding to questions from Labour's Ian Lees-Galloway, Mr Woodhouse said it's inevitable that some people will try to bend the rules.
When there are more than 100,000 international students in our second largest service export earner, there will always be a small number of people who try to bend the rules. That is entirely unacceptable, which is why this government has put in place a number of measures to prevent and prosecute that behaviour.
Supplementary question.
Michael Woodhouse said there are fewer problems now than in the past. A Dunedin hospital clinical leader says general surgeons there are allowed only 2 operating days a month, and it's not enough. Medical specialists say a shortage of intensive care beds for post-operative care has led to long waiting times for prostate cancer checks and cardiac surgery at Dunedin Hospital. The Health Minister Jonathan Coleman told RNZ last week that it's not plausible, but the clinical leader of general surgery at the hospital, Joe Crises, told Checkpoint that is indeed the situation they face.
Which is frustrating, and it's a frustration we have been trying to move forward on for a number of years, but we're still in a situation where there isn't adequate theatre resource provided to our surgeons to be able to do the work they're expected to do.
Dr Joe Crises. A dentist who wants a sugary drinks tax says thousands of children need a general anaesthetic to remove their rotten teeth each year. Health researchers, practitioners and supporters have delivered a petition to MPs in Wellington signed by 10,000 people calling for a tax on sugary drinks. They say these drinks are the leading source of sugar in young people's diets. A dentist, Dr. Rob Beaglehole, says he recently pulled 11 teeth from a 3-year-old who'd been drinking Coca-Cola out of a baby's bottle.
Every single day in New Zealand there are multiple kids, young kids, who need to have a general anaesthetic to have their teeth taken out. Last year 6,600 kids had a general anaesthetic to take out one or multiple teeth. We also know that last year 30,000 children had one or more teeth taken out.
Rob Beaglehole says a sugary drinks tax would help reduce the amount young people consume. The government's revealed more than 30 projects it will support to help clean up about 100 rivers and lakes around the country. The money's coming from a contestable fund to improve water quality. The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, says $44 million will go towards fencing waterways, planting along streams, developing wetlands and eradicating water weeds.
So it's about funding fencing, riparian planting, sewage reticulation, storage of water to lift minimum flows, getting rid of fish pests, as well as retiring some areas of land to create wetlands and to improve freshwater quality.
Nick Smith. The principal of a high school whose letter to parents named and blamed a student for committing suicide says he's very sorry and saddened that he's caused further distress. In the letter, the principal called the actions of the girl an irreversible and unacceptable choice. Jessie Chang reports.
The principal, who RNZ has decided not to name, declined to be interviewed about his letter, saying in a statement that it wasn't the best interest for his students. He said it wasn't his intention to cause more distress, and everyone at the school feels deeply for the students' family and friends. Yesterday, mental health advocate Mike King criticised the letter, saying while the school's intentions may have been good, its delivery was appalling. He said the letter ostracised the girl and shamed her and her family in front of the entire community. Ko Jessie Chang aho.
It's 6:05. To sport and badminton officials say a match-fixing attempt at the New Zealand Open in Auckland last week is a wake-up call for all sports. Few details about the incident are being released as Badminton New Zealand continues to investigate the matter. The organisation's chief executive, Joe Hitchcock, says a New Zealand player was approached at the tournament and asked to fix a match but reported the matter to officials. Hitchcock says it's the first such incident they've had to deal with, but the sport has protocols for dealing with corruption.
It's very, very rare, but I do think it is an issue that every sport will need to be addressing and working through and dealing with. It's an unfortunate reality of sport these days.
Joe Hitchcock says the New Zealand Open was broadcast to an audience of more than 100 million people, and New Zealand sports need to be aware of the downsides of such global interest. The Tall Blacks take a step into the unknown tonight in their opening match at the Asia Cup basketball tournament in Lebanon. New Zealand play Kazakhstan, but coach Paul Henare says he knows little about the opposition. With a world ranking of 20th, New Zealand are the highest ranked side in their pool, which also includes South Korea and hosts Lebanon. The Italian tennis player Sara Errani has been suspended for 2 months after a hearing concluded she accidentally took her mother's medication for breast cancer. In evidence, Errani said she believed one of her mother's tablets, which were kept near the kitchen bench, had fallen in and contaminated some soup and tortellini she was preparing. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, fostering global peace and understanding, first through the youth hostel movement and how it grew out of the horrors of the Second World War, although that peace and understanding didn't always make it across the Iron Curtain, and our religious scholar Douglas Pratt discusses resisting extremism through diversity affirmation, and why he thinks the Belgians could teach us a thing or two, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow for all of the North Island. Rain spreading east with some heavy falls tomorrow, easing to showers tomorrow afternoon or evening. Strong northerlies about the central and northern regions for a time tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson rain setting in with heavy falls, clearing tomorrow morning. However, showers remain about the western ranges and the Sounds. Bulla Westland and Fiordland, rain becoming widespread this afternoon and heavy from evening, easing to showers overnight. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered light rain, clearing early tomorrow, then mainly fine. However, a few spots of rain persist in Southland and low cloud develops about the coast south of Timaru from afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today with rain developing overnight. It's bang on 6:08 in your list of Checkpoint.
Thanks so much, Katrina Batten. We began the program with Chris Bramwell, our deputy editor, looking at the events of today. Well, opponents of the Greens are using the party's disarray in the last 24 hours to twist the knife. Let's look at that now. The Greens caucus met this morning to thrash things out after two MPs went public about their loss of confidence in the leadership of Metiria Ture after her benefit fraud. Kennedy Graham and David Clendon will stay on as Green MPs until the election but won't participate in caucus activities or campaigning. They will not seek re-election for the Greens in September. Here is our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Last night, the Green Party co-leader James Shaw wanted to suspend the two MPs from caucus and have them thrown out of the party altogether. He says after sleeping on it, he changed his mind today and an agreement has now been reached among caucus members. The New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters was asked how he'd deal with an MP who'd committed benefit fraud.
The last time I had a Member of Parliament did something like that, I fired him right out of Parliament.
So would you expect Metiria Ture to resign?
No, you're going to ask that party's organisation. I'm talking about mine now.
The Prime Minister, Bill English, says the left side of politics is a mess and he was keen to name-check Labour as well.
Well, Labour and the Greens are joined at the hip and I imagine it's a real concern and it looks like with the turmoil on the left, Labour might have to take a view about Metiria Ture. I think that's a question Ms Ardern will have to answer about whether Labour wants to stay joined at the hip with the Greens.
Do you understand the actions of these two MPs, that they felt that they couldn't work alongside somebody who admitted to welfare fraud?
Well, look, they've made their statement, which I think a lot of people would be able to understand.
The Labour leader Jacinda Ardern, who's now been at the helm for a week, says the memorandum of understanding between Labour and the Greens remains intact, but she stands by her decision to rule Mrs Ture out of a ministerial position in any Labour Greens government last Friday, regardless of what's happened since. She says she's only responsible for what happens in Labour.
Ultimately, I can only control what is within my power, and as I said in my very first press conference, I'm going to be focused on Labour's issues. One party is quite sufficient for me, and ultimately voters will decide the makeup of government. They'll decide who they place their vote with. A conversation about other parties or the makeup of a possible alternative government, I think, distracts from our ability to talk about those issues.
The leader of the Opportunities Party, Gareth Morgan, says he'd welcome Kennedy Graham and David Clendon as candidates for his party.
Because I think they've both got fantastic track records. They're clearly people of principle. And, yeah, I mean, I think any party who has got, issues of social justice and environment at their heart, which, we definitely have, would be proud to have those guys.
And he backs the stance of the two MPs.
To stand up and say, this is not good, what's happening, Metiria, and it's either you or us. I think that's the right thing to do. So I think she's way out of line, and they're right, she should have gone.
The ACT leader David Seymour has been one of the fiercest critics of Mrs Ture and the Greens.
Kennedy Graham and David Clendon have shown they've got some real principle. James Shaw has been made to look as weak as a Green Party herbal tea, and the real disappointment is Metiria Ture, who has exploited and let down the struggling solo mums that she purports to be supporting.
How's she exploited and let them down?
Oh, she's claimed that she was doing it hard when the reality is she was breaking the law, standing for Parliament.
Metiria Ture is not resigning from any of her statements.
What I've said is I will not condemn people who have had to do the same thing I did. And that's because I can't possibly condemn them and accept my own history. I want to change the system so that nobody ever has to lie to win.
Mrs Ture says she now goes into the election with the full backing of the caucus and her party, a caucus that effectively has two fewer MPs and a perception of party division it will need to work hard to repair. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
We were hoping to talk to outgoing Green MP Kennedy Graham. He's on the phone in the control room as we speak, but it sounds like he hasn't got permission from the party to come on air and talk with us. We're sorry about that. Feedback, lots of it tonight. Kia ora, John. I'm a paid-up Green Party member and have just lost my MP here in Northland. I'm extremely frustrated that Mrs Ture insists on remaining leader despite her self-disclosed dishonesty. I'd agree that too many times those who need our help most are always the least supported and least respected, and our social services and attitudes need overhauling. However, by disclosing, was she going to be found out? ? Means accepting the responsibility of your actions. Please don't let your conflicted morals lead a party that represents fairness and transparency. Please step down, Ms Ture. You are no longer the leader I thought you were, says Christine in Northland. And Michael says this has been gutting. Election fraud is not about poverty, so the argument doesn't wash with this issue. Metiria Ture abused our electoral system when she was an aspiring politician herself. Her fraudulent vote contributed to an election outcome. In some countries, this practice is widespread and results in corruption. Voting is a privilege which has been very hard earned. Metiria Ture has lost her credibility with us, and our party votes will return to Labour. And to vilify two men of principle and response is seriously concerning. I previously looked to the Greens as setting the ethical standard. No longer. 14 minutes past 6. Thank you for your feedback and thank you for being with us on Checkpoint. The debate around problems at Dunedin Hospital has given a big boost to a council campaign to keep the hospital in the central city. The City Council has been campaigning for 5 months to get the government to rule out building a planned new hospital outside the CBD, most likely at the Wakairi Hospital site 4 kilometres away. That decision is expected within weeks, but for the past fortnight, Checkpoint has revealed long surgery delays at the hospital for heart, prostate cancer, orthopaedic patients, you name it. We've also discussed a desperate shortage of ICU beds. Our Otago Southland reporter Ian Telfer visited the council's campaign in action in a Dunedin mall.
Like to send a message to government about the hospital, sir? Hospital rebuild?
Dunedin City Councillors are on the hustings, this time not for an election, but for the site of the city's promised new hospital. But after 5 months of campaigning, Councillor Christine Gary says public support has suddenly spiked.
This last weekend there was just a change in the momentum. I'm sure it was because there was a lot of talk in the media about the hospital and other areas of interest, and the momentum here, we had a queue of people.
There wasn't a queue at lunchtime today, but a steady trickle, with dozens signing up to the campaign. People like this Dunedin hospital nurse.
It's really hard to work in a hospital with really limited resources and cancelling surgeries every day that people need because there's no beds or no resources to do it.
Yeah, right. So you're seeing it?
Yeah, absolutely, firsthand. Yeah, as a patient and as a nurse, yeah.
Yeah, and has this got worse or better, or what do you think?
I think it's got worse, actually. Yeah, it's definitely getting worse.
Does that make it hard? Morale? Like what do people feel like?
It's hard being the nurse that's saying, oh, you're not getting surgery today because there's not an ICU bed or there's no HDU beds for you.
Her student friend agrees.
Yeah, I've got friends in hospital at the moment, and it's really hard visiting them and hearing that they've had to wait for surgeries, and it's just not really good enough. And I'm a planning student at the university, and so this is something that it needs to change. It's getting worse and no one's doing anything about it.
Andy Craig, who's been a patient several times, says there's no doubt the hospital's struggling.
Wait times are off the hook. I was the only one in the waiting room waiting 4 hours to be seen. Get down there and there's nobody in the hospital. So it's obvious to me that they're understaffed, under-resourced.
For some, emotions are running high.
Disgusting. It needs to be rectified right now.
And with 6 weeks to the election, people are looking for solutions.
Problems with leaking buildings, I think it's well overdue.
Is it an election issue? Like, how concerned are people, do you think?
Yeah, if a party said they're going to build it tomorrow, then they'd get my vote.
The Health Minister, Jonathan Coleman's, insisting the hospital and the Southern District Health Board, which runs it, have enough money and just need to get their act together. The board's commissioner, Kathy Grant, says they can make the current funding work. But Councillor Christine Gary doubts that.
I think it's an overstressed hospital that's underfunded. I think it's really quite simple. And I haven't seen any improvements since the commissioner's been in there. I'm not assured at all. And that really concerns me.
Ms Gary says she thought the council had hit the right campaign when it started in March, but is even more convinced now she sees the way the public's backing it. In central Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
Well, we had been hoping to talk to outgoing Green MP Kennedy Graham on the programme. In fact, we had him on the phone, but he wouldn't be put through to the studio because he says he doesn't have permission to talk. So joining us now is Green Party co-leader James Shaw. Hi, James. Welcome back to Checkpoint. Did you tell Kennedy Graham that he couldn't come on the programme tonight?
So we had a caucus meeting this morning, which I think everybody's fairly well aware of.
Absolutely. I saw you stand up after that. Has he been in touch with you tonight saying, hey, I'd like to go on Checkpoint to talk about, what I did and why I did it?
No, but I have seen him throughout the day.
And so why can't he talk?
Well, we just had an agreement between all of the members of caucus that because passions are running high at the moment, and we just want to kind of move on, that Materia and I, as the co-leaders of the party, would do the talking on this.
Which I guess is convenient for you, isn't it? And does Kennedy Graham do high passions? I mean, I'm not being glib here, but there is, I'm not living in fear of him coming on Checkpoint, for example, and defaming someone. This is a guy who is the Jeffrey Boycott of Parliament, really. He plays a pretty straight bat, and he is opting out. And doesn't he have the right to talk about why?
Yeah, of course he has the right, but it's as a result of a conversation that we had in our caucus that we decided, because we wanted to calm things down, that we would do it a certain way. And I mean, he and David offered to withdraw from the caucus. I mean, this is a sort of remarkably green way of doing it. Is that we sat in a circle and said, okay, well, here's what's happened. What are we going to do about it?
Is it a remarkably green way of doing it? This is, I don't know whether it was Tracy Watkin or Audrey Young who was making this point in an op-ed I read. You'll know the one I'm talking about. But this seems ungreen. This seems different in some respect. Why is that?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I read that column and
it was Tracy Watkins, I think, wasn't it?
Was sort of, I think it was Tracy Watkins, sort of saying, oh, well, this is the kind of thing that happens in other political parties, and of course it does, and it's unfortunate, and I've been wondering whether that's as a result of the fact that we've changed or the fact that we've been around for 27 years, and it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. You've got a group of people who are in a pretty high pressure situation. Pretty diverse group of people, and as we know, you have your disagreements. And on this one, it led to Kennedy and David deciding that they couldn't continue. So,
and what was it? What was the thing when they spoke to you? What was the thing they most disagreed with?
I can't say what it was that they most disagreed with. I mean, we've been having a conversation with Kennedy in particular over the course of the last few weeks. I mean, he and Dave both have, I think you said, very strong vision and values and a moral code, and they just felt that the way that we were conducting this campaign and the way that Materia in particular was leading the anti-poverty campaign was inconsistent with what they viewed.
Hold on. I'm sorry to interrupt because I want to hear your answer, but leading the anti-poverty campaign is a disingenuous phrase. They weren't worried about her leadership of the anti-poverty campaign. I'm sure they were delighted she was leading an anti-poverty campaign. They were worried about what they saw surely as fraud and the fact she wouldn't resile from that. Now, the question is, and this is the debate you've been having, this is the debate the country's having, does the means justify, does the end justify the means?
Yeah, John, so this is where, Kennedy and I end up on, slightly different views. My view here is, look, I'm a person with some privilege. I'm not a parent. And I have to think about what would it be like if I was, a young woman with a child and I was living below the breadline and Ruth Richardson's mother of all budgets had just happened, and they sort of put through a series of benefit cuts calculated to be 20% below the minimum cost of living, and having to make that choice about, what do I do here? Do I kind of bend the system a bit, or do I, not feed my child?
Right.
And that's a pretty tough choice to have to make.
It's a really tough choice. And I guess to try and work out, because we're not allowed to talk to them, what Kennedy Graham and David Clinton are saying, they're saying, actually, we lead by example, right?
Yes.
That our legislature, that our House of Representatives, actually, if it was a House of Representatives, a true House of Representatives, it'd be full of all sorts of folk, right? It'd be full of dope smokers and people who listen to death metal, and so, it would be. But what they're saying is actually Parliament must lead by example. It must be the best of us, surely. Is that their point?
Broadly speaking, yes. Broadly speaking, yes.
And are they wrong?
No, I don't disagree with that point at all. I guess, where I come down on it is to say, well, everybody's also entitled to a past. And, in this particular case, whether you can agree with what Materia did or not, the choice to tell her story and to expose herself that way, they felt was inappropriate and took risks. And in that sense, it was.
Okay, two very quick questions. Do you think she will stay on? Is she going to lead you into the election and then stand down afterwards? Is she going to do another term after this?
Well, she has told me that she intends to carry on.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And do you think Kennedy Graham and David Clinton will go to Gareth Morgan's top party?
No. They are green to the core, the both of them.
Well, but not any longer. And isn't that a pity?
It is. I value both men a great deal for their integrity and for their vision, but also for their experience. I think Kennedy has done more to build the conversation around what do we do around climate change in this country more than anybody that I can think of. And Dave is probably Parliament's leading light when it comes to restorative justice and how do we keep people out of jail. And that is a tragedy. But people have to make their choices around their conscience and their vision and their values, and they've done that. And I respect that. I wasn't pleased with the way they went about it, but I respect their choice.
James Shaw, Green Party co-leader, thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. New Zealand's non-compliance with drinking water safety standards and its training of assessors have come under fire at the Havelock North Water Inquiry today. The comments come from UK drinking water expert Dr Colin Fricker, who's part of a panel giving advice to the second part of the government's water contamination inquiry. This stage of the inquiry is covering what can be done to prevent another contamination like last year's Campylobacter outbreak. Gemma Brackybush reports from the Hastings District Court.
Stage 1 of the inquiry criticised Hastings District Council and Hawke's Bay Regional Council for failing to safeguard the town's drinking water. The report found neither had substantial plans to deal with the Campylobacter contamination in August last year. Other than the criticism, there were no further consequences for the organisations. Dr Colin Fricker, who's advised drinking water assessors here for 18 years, says New Zealand's lack of enforcement for suppliers to meet safety standards has had a detrimental effect on its water quality.
You see each year the number of water suppliers that have significant transgressions, that don't conform, and it's often the same suppliers year after year after year because there's no punishment. There's nothing to make them change.
Or no threat of punishment.
Well, the threat's kind of dangled there, but it's shrouded in mystery because it's never happened.
Drinking water standards currently come under the Ministry of Health, but the 5 panellists this morning unanimously agreed that an independent regulator, free from political influence and solely focused on water quality, is needed. Speaking outside the court, one of the experts, water and wastewater manager at Harrison Grierson, Ian Rabbits, says a national independent regulator would require a level of expertise that isn't possible on a local level.
It needs to cover not just health but engineering, science and all the different aspects that make up a water supply. I think the level of compliance, the level of regulation we have now is at a very low level, and that is not the fault of the regulators, the people who are doing it. It's the nature of the setup that we have.
The role of a drinking water assessor, or DWA, was also put in the spotlight. Of the 40 submissions received for this inquiry, many wrote they don't believe assessors have sufficient knowledge or training. Dr Colin Fricker agreed and says in the UK most assessors have an engineering background.
To have drinking water assessors that don't understand the intricacies of water treatment and maintenance of water quality is beyond me, because They need to be able to look at what a water operator is doing and say, is that best practice? Are you doing that the right way? And my experience would be that the majority of drinking water assessors that I have come across don't understand water treatment.
Dr Fricker says the training package for DWAs needs to be broadened and tailored to meet the needs of people who are entering the industry with different experience. The inquiry is set down for the rest of the week. In Hastings for Checkpoint, Gemma Brackybush.
6:27. An Australian cafe has taken a novel approach to tackling the issue of the gender pay gap. The owner of the Melbourne cafe has taken matters into her own hands and introduced a man tax. The BBC's Jonathan Savage has the story.
When it comes to its ethos, the name of the cafe is a bit of a giveaway. Walk into Handsome Her in the city of Melbourne and you see a blackboard with house rules written in yellow, blue and pink. Rule number 2, men will be charged an 18% premium to reflect the gender pay gap. Ali O'Brien, the owner, insists the surcharge is voluntary.
We did it at the start to try and raise some funds for women's charities. So far, nobody has refused to pay it, and we've had lots of men and lots of women as well jumping on board and popping some money in the jar.
A positive reaction in store, but on social media, there's been plenty of accusations of battling sexism with sexism.
Typical feminism going too far and creating more problems than solutions.
As a female, I don't agree with this.
This makes me sick. What's wrong with these stupid women?
Just creating a greater divide between genders.
Some people are saying that, that's correct. I understand that could be the case, but that's why we've made it voluntary, so that they have the option to opt in and out of that. Down at the shop, the vibe's going pretty good and everyone's pretty happy.
The positive action doesn't end there. I forgot to mention rule number 1. Women have priority seating.
We haven't had a situation where we've had to turf men out, nor would we turf men out. I think with the priority seating, what we mean is that if we have a lot of people waiting for seats, we're going to see mothers with children or pregnant women or older women. We're going to put women down first before men. Essentially, the space is for women. It's a women's space.
The 18% surcharge for men may be controversial, but it's not a permanent feature. The owners say it's in place 1 week every month, but they're always looking for new ways to highlight inequality between the sexes.
Excellent report from the BBC's Jonathan Savage. We're going to call that cafe tomorrow. Thank you for being with us. It's been a busy old few weeks in Checkpoint. On Checkpoint, we're getting lots and lots of feedback, and we really appreciate it and the pleasure and privilege of your company on behalf of our excellent, excellent team who are swaying in time to the music. And the control room show us sway, sway. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Greens co-leader Materia Ture is not resiling from comments she made about supporting beneficiaries who lie to work an income because they're struggling financially, despite 2 Green MPs not seeking re-election over them. The Immigration Minister has told Parliament government agencies are trying to stamp out the practice of job selling to foreign students. A Dunedin hospital clinical leader says general surgeons there are only allowed 2 operating days a month, and it's not enough. And a dentist who wants a sugary drinks tax says thousands of children need a general anaesthetic to remove their rotten teeth each year. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Richard Dawson is a contemporary songwriter and guitarist, but on his latest album he might be some peasant singer from medieval times. I'm Nick Bollinger and I'll be reviewing Richard Dawson's Peasant in the Sampler.
Oh, you're taking